Good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of Sounds of the Diaspora, Artist to Artist, conversation with yours truly, Dion Parson. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest tonight, a gentleman that I've known for many, many years. He's a wonderful pianist, a composer, educator, producer. He's Grammy nominated, good friend of mine. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Elio Villafranca.
Hey Dion, how you doing, my friend? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. How's it going?
It's going well, thank you.
Good. And you're in New York City right now, correct?
I'm in New York. I just finished my Juilliard classes, so I'm tapping to a room here and then to be able to talk to you.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join the show and hang out with us here at Sounds of the Diaspora, where we talk about, all the great things that's coming from the Afro-Caribbean diaspora and other places and try to connect that dot. So you're from Cuba, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I was born there and raised in a small town called San Luis in Pinar del Ri, which is like the west part of Cuba, the most western province in Cuba. And my hometown is known for tobacco. Most of the Cuban cigars come from there. But it's a very rich town in Congolese music. That's how I was introduced to drumming through my neighbors being from the Congolese traditions. My direct neighbor was the leader of the Congolese group there, and I used to see them all the time rehearsing, performing, tuning the drum with fire, and it was really fascinating as a kid. Of course, the fire was a fascination, not so much the drum at the time. But eventually, the drum was getting to me. Eventually, I started feeling more in touch with the drums, and that was the area where I was born.
Great. Real quick, just for our audience, so the tuning on the drums with the fire, that was because the drum head was made from a natural skin, calf cow skin, right? Yes. So they would wet it and heat it up to heighten the pitch and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. That type of drum is called tambor yuca, which is one of the main three forms of Congolese music. One is palo, makuta, yuca, and kimfuit is the other one, but yuca is one of the other mains. Mm-hmm. And then those drums are made out of avocado trees. And the reason why they use avocado trees is because the avocado tree has something particular. When the avocado trees, the trunk gets old, gets hollow inside, or softer inside, not 100% hollow, but it's easy to extract the inside part out. And then with fire, they will kind of smooth the inside part. And then they put the animal skin on top, they nail it. And then of course, they wet a little bit and they nail it. And then they use a fire to stretch the skin and then to tune the drums. And as a matter of fact, those drums are considered the first drum ever played in Cuba. For that reason, because those drums are not religious, they're secular drums, and then the confection of the drums is so easy because basically it's a trunk and then you nail a skin on it and then you tune it with fire. I mean, it can't get any easier than that. Different from the Yoruban tradition, the bata drums that you need to. The shape of the drum is very different, and then you have to kind of. The tuning system of the bata drums, on the arara drums, on the abakwa drums, it's very specific, very complicated, but not with the Congolese drums.
Okay, so that's great to know. So that was your first influence to the music through the Congolese drums, and many people don't know this about you, but you are a percussionist. You studied percussion.
Yes, but even before the percussion, that introduction, I was a painter. And my first vocation as an art in the art was painting. Then from that I got into the guitar. I was playing guitar for some times, and then from the guitar I went to percussion because I did the audition to go in the music school as a guitarist, but they didn't have any more instruments, any more guitars to give me for me to enter the school. And then they said, well, but we do have percussion available. And then since I was already introduced to the drum, but seeing my neighbors playing, I was like, oh yeah, that would be cool. I can play the drums. But I didn't know that the type of drumming that I'm going to be doing was not that kind of drumming. I'm going to be doing classical drumming.
Right.
Which is a different thing. I wasn't playing the drums per se. I was playing snare, timpani and xylophone, marimbas. It was nothing like what I was hoping to be playing at first.
Right. So that's a big contrast, because when people think of the drums, they think of a drum set, but they don't realize that the percussion family covers so many specific components of the drums. Classical, you have rudimental drumming, and like you mentioned, the timpanis. You have all the mallets, the xylophone, the marimba. But the interesting thing is, from what you shared with me over the years of knowing each other, none of your cultural heritage was presented in the music school. It was strictly classical.
No. It's strictly classical and Russian style, not just classical. I'm talking about classical Russian style, which means the Russian type of training in classical music is very specific, very specific, very strong, very hardcore, I should say. So I was trained in that environment. So for me to learn the other part of the drumming or the Cuban music per se, I have to do it outside of school. So I used to go a lot to rumbas and ceremonies and things like that, where I can have access to this music. At first, do that, and then we cried a lot, really hard to get some training in folkloric music. I had a teacher. His name was Leoneda, who was the director of the Cathedral of Percussion, the percussion faculty. And then he also fought with us. And then finally, they allowed some rumberos and some santeros to go into the school. The reason why they didn't want them there was because, once again, it was a Russian, basically, institutions. My teachers were Russians. A lot of teachers that I had were Russians. So they felt like people, because the people who played this music were in the hoods, was like in the barrios. They didn't have an education. They didn't have anything. There was people born to play the drums, and the really rough neighborhood in Havana. They didn't want to bring those people into
school,
into the school, because they felt like, no, this is a high class school. These people who have doctor degrees and blah blah blah, and these people, they don't have a degree. But eventually, they allowed them to come, and then I started receiving some actual, real good education on traditional Cuban music, percussion, for that say. Then the piano came along. The piano came along because I was good at percussion, but there were people better than me. Let's put it that way. So, and every time I went to a jam session at the school, there was jam sessions that we used to organize. All the drums were already taken. The only thing that was never taken was the piano.
Oh, okay.
Because nobody knew how to play jazz or popular music, or in a jam situation, because everybody was trained in classical music. Nobody knew how to do it. And then I didn't even know how to do it either, but I was interested in, and I was jumping to the piano, started kind of trying to do something. And then eventually, since I was the only one doing that at that moment, they started whenever they had a jam session, they started calling me, hey, would you come and play the piano for us, because we need a pianist to do a descarga, a jam session. And then I started doing that, and then that's when I realized, well, if I'm going to be doing this, I need to know what I'm doing. And then that's when I started taking the piano very seriously. That's when I started going to Chucho Valdez's home to learn standards of Gonzalo Rubalcaba's house, to kind of to copy, because Chucho, Gonzalo, Hernan Lopez Nusa, those were the people who had the information, because those are the people who, at that time, they could travel outside of Cuba, because Cuba was very locked. It was very close. Nobody was allowed to go out, but Chucho was able to go out, and Gonzalo was able to go out, and then we'll come back. They came back with information. So then I would go to their homes, and then they would show me the books, but said that you can't take them with you. You have to somehow copy it there. So I would bring a manuscript, pencil, and we spend the whole afternoon just copying things while I see Gonzalo practicing in the next room, and I'm just copying stuff.
That's quite interesting.
That's how I got to this.
Yeah, because back then we didn't have, we'd have the internet and all of that stuff to just share information. So you had to go in and find it, and then figure out a way to get it for yourself. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. That's. I mean, being growing up in the Caribbean, a lot of people don't know the challenges that we have. And then you being in Cuba, and it's a different government, it's a different society, it's a different culture. You are really isolated from the rest of the world.
Yeah, jazz was forbidden. It was actually illegal. Anything that came from the US was illegal. So we have to, like, I remember like 2 a.m. We only have there was one tape player that belongs to a friend of mine, percussionist too. His name was Raul del Sol. He lives in Miami now, and he's a singer. But he has the only tape player in the entire school. So
Wow.
of course there was only few people who were interested in playing jazz. So, but still was a few of us. And then whenever we get a tape that we can record some music, then I had to ask him for the tape player. And then sometimes the line was very big, very long,
Yeah.
and then they said, well, the tape player is free at 2 a.m. I was like, okay, I get it. I take that time, and I will go outside. I had to go outside the school because we were living in a boarding school type situation. It was like the dorms were like military style. There were no room. There was like a big open place with bunkers.
Oh,
And
okay.
then, of course, like you couldn't really listen music there because you're gonna be waking everybody up. So I will have to go outside of the dorm, go outside of the school where it was an outlet. There was an outlet, like a lamp, like maybe like I don't know how many meters away from, like far away from the school. And then we used to go there, connect the tape player there in that outlet, and then listen all night to
Wow.
records.
Wow. You have to be really, really committed and determined to learn that music to go through all of that. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it paid off. It paid off because Elio Villafranca is who he is now because of that upbringing. I know it was a challenge. We didn't quite have it that difficult in St. Thomas, but the resources was limited as well on that scale. But you did a great thing. So, did you graduate from the school as a percussionist or as a pianist?
I graduated as a percussionist and as a composer. But
Okay.
in the education of Russian training system, when you enter the career as a composer, you have to play a very good piano. So basically, they teach you at the same level that they train the pianist to the same level. I had to play Rachmaninoff, Prokofiev, Stravinsky. I had to play all the bigger pieces that everybody else was doing, because in a Russian type of training, not only they train you to be a composer, you have to be a pianist and you have to be a conductor, an orchestra conductor, because in a Russian style, you're thinking about Stravinsky and Prokofiev, they were all composers, but they were great pianists and they were conductors. So that's the mindset. They was all together. So my training as a pianist, I didn't get a paper as a degree, but the training was as high as any other pianist training. But I didn't get the paper necessarily because I started as a percussion when I was. For you to get the paper, you have to start like 6 years old or something in that vein. But I started in percussion, and then I went to composition, and then the piano was what I was doing anyway.
Right.
That was my career. Basically, even though I was doing percussion, but I was just have my own jazz group. I was playing with all the bands as a pianist. After what I mentioned, after the jam session, was doing the jam session, then word of mouth, they started commenting, oh, this is another pianist and then people started coming to the school looking for me to join the band as a pianist. And then that's how I started playing with Carlos Varela for 8 years as a pianist, because he came and found me. It's like,
okay.
And then that's how, yeah.
Interesting story. So when did you transition to America? How did that happen?
1995. I was just graduated from school, and I was teaching at the university because ironically, they didn't like when I was, doing jazz. They, had to do it hiding, right? But then Americans start coming to Cuba to learn Cuban music, learn popular Cuban music or Latin jazz. And the school, since it was a classical school of music, they didn't have anyone to actually teach those courses.
Okay.
Then they knew that I was doing that already on the street. They knew it, but they didn't tell me anything, but they knew it. And then they asked me, would you be able to teach some of those foreigners to, popular Cuban music and jazz and things like that? I said yes. And then eventually when I graduated, they kept me as a, teacher for, harmonic courses and then shortly after that, I came to the US in 1995.
Okay. Nice. So you was teaching there already. You're still teaching now. That's a main staple of what you do still, on top of you playing and touring. And how do you juggle all of that? Where are you teaching now?
Right now, I'm fortunate. I mean, I'm teaching one of the most leading, best university of music that there is in this country. I mean, Juilliard School, Manhattan School of Music, Princeton University, and Temple University.
Okay.
Yeah, and how I juggle, I guess luck, because I had to every day I had to be in one of those conservatories. Sometimes some days I had to be in two conservatories at the same time,
Wow.
one after the other. I mean, and then when I booked my tourings, I try to book them in times when there's not a lot of conflict. Like when
Okay.
there's like the spring breaks and at the end of the year, like I try to not to affect my students too much. And then eventually, if that happens, then they allow me to bring a sub, and then I get a sub, and then yeah.
Okay. So are you teaching now? Are you teaching ensembles? You're still doing the Latin?
I teach everything. Yeah, I teach ensembles. In every school that I am, I teach ensembles, and then I also have private piano lessons. I also do improvisation classes,
Okay.
and then I also do courses in composition, and then I also do courses on music history. Now, the music history that I teach is different than the classical music history. I created a course called Roots Music, Rhythms, and Dance of the Americas, where I take the students on a journey throughout many of the countries on the Caribbean and South America, Central America and South America, where I expose them to all the diaspora of all the Afro diaspora in every single of those countries. Like, for example, in the Caribbean, I do like Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, like few different things in Lesson and Antillers, and then in the Central America, I do Panama and Belize and Honduras, and then in South America I do Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Brazil. Yeah.
One of the things I admire about you is that, you're mentioning teaching the music from these different places throughout the Caribbean and Central America and South America. You've actually been to many of these places and studied
all of the places that I taught, I've been there.
You've been there.
That's one of my passions. I like when I talked about a country, I like to have experienced the country myself.
Right.
And because I don't like to talk about something. I remember when I was doing Cinque, which was about 5 different nations like Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Haiti. Haiti was the only one that I haven't been when I was doing Cinque. And I actually got on a trip, and I went to Haiti and spent there like 2 weeks. And I did a whole series of documentary, like filming. I went to all kinds of ceremonies, like voodoo ceremonies, Brada ceremonies, Congo ceremonies. I went to all of that because I wanted to experience myself, the country, and it's just such a different thing. Like, because when I write the music, I want to write it from a very genuine place, not
Right.
to write from hypothetical,
Right.
you know.
Right. One of the things that I notice about your music is very passionate music, and you can explain. I've seen you do this. You've explained to everybody in the band specifically what's going on, and a lot of times, I mean, composers, you write and you could do it that way, but there's like rhythms, especially. I've heard your music where there's like three different rhythms going on at the same time, and it doesn't sound like it's connected, but then it is connected when it's done right. And I've seen you and heard you explain it in that way, and there's a level of rhythmic complexity that you have, but when you combine it, it's so simple. But it's not easy. But again, this is the reason why, because you've been through those cultures and you've experienced. I've heard many jazz musicians talk about rhythms from the Caribbean and how they are not well versed in it. Like, I don't know what's happening in the Caribbean because you guys do this and you guys do this and you guys do this. But a lot of the rhythms are the same, but they're just being presented in different ways on different islands. Yeah.
I mean, and that's one of the beauty things about learning the Afro diaspora from different places, because eventually you start understanding, you start hearing like, oh, well, it's the same thing.
Right.
Because I mean, if you think about it, the people who were brought from Africa were like from the Congo, from Nigeria, there was the same people.
Right.
So, and then they spread everybody else. They spread everybody all over the place. But the seed, it's almost like you bring seeds and you just spread the seeds in different countries, but then the plant will come up, right? But then it's the same plant, but maybe some variations here and there because the weather there is different or because the soil is a little bit different. But the seed, the root of the plant is still the same.
Right.
And when you listen to bomba playing from Puerto Rico and I don't know, like tumba francesa, and then you listen to candomblé, and you listen, it's like, wait a minute, oh, you start finding this is the same rhythms, the same pattern, but maybe playing with a different instrument that changes the melody. And then it's like sometimes play with sticks, sometimes it's not play with sticks, sometimes play with hands, sometimes, and then you start knowing, like you start hearing everything. And that's what I do with my students. I say, okay, once we go further into the course, and then I ask them, so what this rhythm remind you of? And then eventually they get to like, oh yeah, I remember in this country we heard something, and then they start putting two and two together. And then that's when they realize, like, like everything is so, it's like a big family, really like a big family.
It is. And you do a good job explaining it. And it's all throughout your music. It's all throughout your music. And I'm laughing because I smile every time I hear one of your new pieces. I'm trying to connect the dots. It's like, the maths. It's trying to connect the dots. It's great stuff. It's really, really great stuff. So you have about 10 CDs as a leader, and you're constantly working on commission projects and different things like that. So that clearly that being a composer is your strong suit. But ever since I've known you, you're always working on something. So you have anything that you're working on right now you want to share?
Yeah, I'm working on two different projects right now. One is called Don't Change My Name, which is a story. It's a very interesting story, and I came to this story like almost by accident. I say by accident because when I was doing Cinque, when I was doing the research for Cinque, which was mainly in Congolese music, different form of Congolese music in the Caribbean. A friend of mine told me like, hey, have you heard this music that is in Matanzas? It's a completely different town, different regions in Cuba. And she was like, this form of music is called Gaga, and then Arara. I didn't know much about the Arara or the Ganga traditions in Matanza. I knew a little bit about it by name and references, but I never really studied it. I was like, yeah, I will go to Matanzas and study the music. I went to Matanzas in the same research project that I was doing, and then I documented that music. Okay, I store it, because I thought like eventually I would do something, but I was just involved in Cinque. So many years later passed, and then I was offered to go to Australia to do like a concert. I've already been there doing Cinque, but they said to me, we want you to come back, but you already did Cinque, you have something similar or different. And I said, oh yeah, I can write a piece with this music, Arara music. So then I went back to my records, I uncovered the research, and then I started working on the music. And then I normally, before I do anything, I like to read. I go to my books, literature. I like to read about it. I like to submerge myself in the culture, because often I like to find a story to tell. I don't really write music just to write music. I like to find a story and let the music be the music, and use the music to tell that story.
Right.
So then I was just looking through my books, and then I found this book. It's called Florentina, the Dahomenian Princess. So Dahomey is the town where the Ararat came from. So I thought, okay, this is going to be about Ararat, because Dahomey is from the town. It's probably going to be, let me read this book, and start reading the book. And then I realized that the book was about this lady. Her name was Florentina in Cuba. But I learned that she was brought to Cuba as slave when she was 15 years of age. So, and then I got very intrigued. And then I started reading, investigating. And then I realized that she had 3 names through her career. One is her first name was Toloño. The second name was Nategue when they married her at 15 years of age with the king in Dahomey. And then I think the name of the king was Getsu. And then the last name, once she was brought to Cuba as slave, they branded her, with the iron that they used to do with the enslaved people. And then they renamed it as Florentina. That's the reason why my suite is called Don't Change My Name. Right. Because it's just kind of like, it tells the story of Florentina, like young, like a little bit as an adult, and then just as an older person. And then this project I use the same ensemble that I use for the Cinque project, which is like 5 horns, rhythm section, 2 percussionists, 10 people basically. And then, but I decided to add a choir. Like a classical choir. And then that's what, I just came from Cuba, because I wanted the choir to be from Cuba, because the choir has a lot of information rooted in Arara music, in the Afro diaspora music. And I found like doing it in America, it would have been a bit more complex, because I had to explain the choir, the rhythms, and and they had to clap rhythms sometimes. And I felt like, I better go to Cuba to do this. and then I went to Cuba, and then I found this really great choir. And then actually I created a choir for this particular project. And then that's what this big project is. And then the other project that I'm doing is called Tres Aguas, which I presented at Jazz Lincoln Center with the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra with Winter Marsalis. And this one, Tres Aguas, is also another suite that is inspired by dancing. It's inspired by the rhythm that the dancers create when they dance on the floor, the rhythm that creates on the floor. And and then it's called Tres Aguas because it's almost like talked about 3 different waters or streams of music that are present in jazz and present in. And then, of course, I talked about flamenco music. I talked about, New Orleans tap dancing music. And also talked about like Afro-Peruvian music that has a form of dance similar to the New Orleans tap dancing. And then also talked about Afro-Cuban music for Yoruban, and then other dances from the eastern part of Cuba, Oriente, is called Baile de la Chancleta, which is they dance with the wooden sandals and then they create rhythms in the floor. And then so the suite is all around it's inspired by those rhythms that dancers creates.
Nice. That's great because you, like I said, you're constantly working on a project, and it's quite interesting for audience to understand the person behind the music, because you're a thinker, and I like that. It's nonstop. It's nonstop. Well, we've been talking about your music and all the CDs that you've put up and all the wonderful stuff you've written. Let's check out some of your music. I think we have up front a composition you wrote, Ogeres Cha. And you want to tell us briefly?
Yeah. Ogeres Cha, it was actually it's from my first album. And when I came here, I was already thinking and having this thing that how come, Latin musicians are not too integrated with the jazz musicians. I mean, when I came here in '95, it was like a big division, at least in Philadelphia. Like they would see me, I was like, oh, you play salsa, but they would not consider like, oh, I can play a little bit of jazz too. I can play something that is not just salsa. So my first album was kind of like, okay, well, my first album is gonna be something related to my roots, but then after that, I'm just gonna go in the direction that I want to go. So Ogeres Cha is a melody based on a lullaby. Like an African lullaby. And then the voice that you're gonna hear is Pedrito Martinez, who sang the lullaby, and then with the ensemble is with Terell Stafford and Dafnis Prieto and Pedrito and Chembo on percussion, Jane Bonnet on saxophone, Carlos Enrique on bass. It was one of the first time I collaborated with Carlos Enriquez. And and some of the albums also, Pat Martino, guitarist, is also featured in some of, not in this song, but in some of the tracks. Pat Martino's on it.
Nice. Okay. Ogeres Cha. beautiful.
Thank you.
So that's Pedrito. Now, did Pedrito go to school with you, or
No,
he's
I
younger
met
than you?
Pedrito. I met Pedrito here.
Oh, you met him there. Okay, okay. What
Yeah.
about Dafnis?
Dafnis I met in Cuba.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's great. Beautiful song, and nice concept behind it. What's that particular rhythm called? That's
Well, that the whole song, the vibe is it's like a cha-cha-cha vibe, but it's kind of like a not a very traditional way of playing cha-cha-cha.
right.
But the vibe is in a cha-cha-cha kind of tempo type of vibe. Yeah.
And there's a dance that goes along with it also.
Yeah, Cuban music, every rhythm that you can think of has a dance.
That's great.
Every one of them.
Yeah. And what's Pedrito as he's singing the poem? That's what you said. That was a traditional poem, right? Lullaby.
Yeah, like a lullaby. Yeah, he's singing. He's using it's a mixture of Yoruban language, and and by the way, that section was just improvised.
Right.
Like the whole intro thing. Remember, being in the studio was kind of like, okay, I wanted to do an intro, and then I gave him some context, and then we started improvising on that.
Nice. Yeah. Right. Well, he can do that in his sleep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Nice.
Totally.
Great. So that's your first CD. That song is from your first CD. But then the next song we're gonna present is "Song of Freedom." That's one of your newer pieces that you've written.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of the newer pieces. It comes from my latest album that I released last year called "Standing by the Crossroads." This album is it's very personal album. I mean, every music is personal, but normally, I mean, the first album is personal because it's just me. But then after that, I went on a mission. Like the second album was called "The Source in Between," which speaks about. That's when I started trying to make the case. No. I mean, the roots is always there.
Right.
And then the roots in between Africa is the root, and then in between Latin jazz and jazz. I was trying to get into the thing about proving no, this is the same. It's just just the roots is always there.
Right.
And then also the same thing with the Caribbean Tinge, talking about the Jelly Roll Morton Spanish Tinge, making an argument he should call it Caribbean Tinge because he called it Spanish Tinge because he knew the Habanera, which was a style of Cuban contra dance. He knew the Habanera style from a Spanish composer, and then of course it's oh yeah, Spanish Tinge, Right. But I think I was no, he should have called it the Caribbean Tinge. But at the time, Caribbean, we were owned by so many different people. Cuba was owned by Spain and France, and I started making all these cases. And then the other project, the Cinque project, it was about a person, and then Don't Change My Name is about the woman, like heroes of mine, right? So Standing by the Crossroads speaks more about me, all the crossroads situations that I faced growing up in Cuba as an artist, as a jazz artist, and all the things that I had to go through, all the hoops that I had to jump to get where I am right now, musically, artistically. And then Song for Freedom is a song that I did after the event that happens in Cuba in July 11th. There was a big revolt of Cuban artists protesting a rule that the government has placed at the time, saying they were going to dictate what was art and what wasn't art. Because of course, I mean, it's a system that it's a centralized system where everybody gets paid through the government. Right. Now it's a little bit different, but back then, everybody just get the salary through the government. So you are an artist, and the government say, "Oh, your music is not an art because it doesn't represent the government's value." So then we know, you don't get. As an artist, you die because you don't get paid, you don't get promoted, you don't do anything, you don't get anywhere. So anyway, many artists went to protest that law. Many of whom are still incarcerated in Cuba. Yeah. I mean, it was one of the biggest revolt that happens in Cuba since the 1960s revolutions in Cuba. And I was here in New York when that was happening, and then that's when I decided to write this song for Freedom, in tribute to those people who were, protesting that law, and and speaking out about their art and their beliefs, basically. It's exercising their freedom, to express themselves.
Let's take a listen. Song for Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So, Elio, we have a wonderful comment here from one of our listeners saying, "Beautiful melody, sweet."
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, standing by the crossroads. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's just it's a very beautiful piece, straight paying homage to the musicians that were incarcerated and was protesting against their right. But I can hear the beauty in it, and it's a waltz. It's more of it's like a traditional waltz. Yeah, really nice. And some of those songs, something like a waltz. We grew up in the '60s, '70s hearing waltz. It's so simple, but it's not easy to play.
No.
It's not easy to play at all. So, but that's great. So folks can check that out. Song for Freedom. I want to continue with HBC. HBC is what does HBC stand for?
It's called Havana Blues Chronicle.
Okay.
Havana Blues Chronicle is basically a piece that once again is part of this album called Standing by the Crossroads, and once again it speaks about my trajectory as an artist, growing up in Cuba. So that was the moment when in this story that I'm trying to tell, that's the moment when I went from growing up in San Luis, a small town where the Congolese people are, the tobacco land and all this stuff, growing up, moving from there into Havana, which was it's the biggest city, it's the capital of Cuba. It's almost like going to New York for me. It was kind of like very stimulating. Everything collided. Like religion collided for me, politics, music, everything was collided in all at once. And this piece, Havana Blues Chronicle, is kind of like it's almost like me trying to explain how it felt for me getting to Havana and being in a city that has so much stuff going on at once. At the end of the song, you hear this abacuas chant in the middle of the thing. It's just like that. It's just kind of like all these things happening at the same time.
Going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's check it out. HBC, Havana Blues Chronicles. Well, I'm guessing it's not coming on right now. We're waiting for the Havana Blues Chronicles, but it's not coming up right now. So, well, while we're waiting for that, so this is part of your last project, correct? The last CD that came out, Song for Freedom.
Yeah, Song for Freedom and Havana Blues Chronicle are part of my last project, Standing by the Crossroads, which is almost like a project that is not the music is not in chronological order, but it is kind of tells different stories about my upbringing in Cuba. As a matter of fact, for this project I also wrote a book. And the book is called Havana Blues Mosaic, because I call it mosaic because it's almost like a different stories that I put out, like growing up, different stories that shaped me as an artist that I am right now. And then the music goes along with those stories. So the book, if you read in the book, every story is represented by the music that that I used in the album.
Great. Now, how many songs do you have on the album?
It's a double album. It's 12 songs.
12 songs? Okay. And who's the personnel on that album?
The lineup is Vincent Herring on alto saxophone, Freddie Hendricks on trumpet, Dana Stephan on tenor saxophone and bass clarinet, Edward Perez on bass, Domo Branch on drums, Mauricio Herrera on percussion, also Jonathan Troncoso on percussion, and then also Jonathan Kreisberg on guitar, and Cecile Lawrence actually is the guest artist that she sings in a song there, and also Mark Vilasek is another singer who also sang in another song.
Okay, good, great. Well, let's check this out. HBC, Habana Blues Chronicles.
Chronicle, yeah.
el encañoso así. Hacer el millán otón, hacer el millán abacua, avión en tabio, avión pirama, y a paso yu en barancono, y a paso yu a cubará. A tococopamo cairé, azúcar a cuanti en el huemio, y a vaciabo me. Hacer el grupo robón, indio bon, entenche, no bon, manchen, no bon, obonego, hacer el mañocumba coro. Pinar del Ri aquí, y can y pío, rorona, cubo. Barroco muña vía, buena pompón, aguana pompón temio, su guatereñón, siruaca navio. Yamba mayimba conre que de guapo, nambere que de guamomi, que de guani tongo, si caneco en llene mi baibo. Hacer el grupo de que de guama, si va a tal sentirá a fondo, va a cuara mina, mococo, erupe a fondo. Rayo hacen canima, en clica, motar y a condo, el coñón yagasi gama. Hacer mutanga de foro, ro, anglón, champeo, aguanango, y añaña, guarumi, amani, va, erombe, abacina, numbre. Lorie que le guapo, namber, erombe, agua, baroco, boco, beba. Eroema, pa, bongo, emumio, muñeque, ñongo, carabalí, mañón. Bongo, cano, eruacue. Entume, quiñongo, munanta, iro, bongo, erombe, munancabia, efi, acuaramina, bibi. Bongo, cocorico, tafia. Atevere, agua, erombe, atevere, bongo, masiva, bongo, erombe.
That's a fun one. It's busy. Yeah, but all of those rhythms, like you said, the abaquah at the end is just laying on top of, the book. It's there's a simplicity when it comes together, but it's so complex, and so man, so that's what Cuba felt like. That's what Havana felt like when you moved there.
Exactly, that's what Havana felt like. All the scenes just merging and colliding, religion and jazz and Latin jazz, and everything was in there.
Wow.
Yeah. Classical music.
Classical, everything is in there. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We have time for one more. I just want to jump into this song and play it for our audience, and then you could give a brief description after, because we're pushing our limit here. But I really want the audience to hear this. So the fourth one is Panel de Abejas.
Yeah, Panel de Abejas is a beautiful way to end, because that's about my grandmother. Yeah, Panel de Abejas is about my grandmother. I in that piece I talked about how my grandmother was the queen of my household, like which was like the honeycomb, and then my grandmother was the queen of my family. And then once my grandmother died, then my house become like rocket. Like I compare it to Panal de Abejas to the honeycomb, right? Because when the queens die, then the honeycomb just dies too, because the sole purpose of those is to serve the queen, right? So that's exactly the same thing that happened with my grandmother when she passed away. Then there was a lot of inside fight within my family. Then my grandfather died, then it became like really we were not unified anymore.
Wow.
And then so this piece is that, and of course since it's called Panal de Abejas, it has this motif between the horns that is simulating the beats, the buzz of the bees, right? Like yeah.
Okay, well, let's check it out. Yes, Elio Villafranca, thank you. Thank you for sharing your beautiful compositions with us tonight and sharing your story. It's been a pleasure, man. I really enjoy you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I had a really wonderful time talking to you and listening again my music, because I don't get to listen too much of it. I record it and then I just move on. So it's nice to listen back again. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, you have so many other CDs and great stories. We definitely will love to have you back and share some more of your music with us. So,
anytime, my friend. Anytime.
Continued success to you, my brother. Take care.
And I see you in Ireland.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was Elio Villafranca joining us tonight. And we thank him for all the wonderful music he shared. Join us next week as we bring to you another wonderful guest, another great pianist, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Carlton Holmes. He will be sharing his story, his music with you as we continue to explore the sounds of the diaspora with Dion Parson. That's me. You take care. Have a wonderful evening. And see you next week. Take care.
JBH Boutique Care offers you a unique exclusive membership in our nationwide concierge medical services network. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Judine Bontemps Hill. I'm double board certified in family and obesity medicine. We pair exclusive personalized care with accessibility and convenience. A better way for you to receive immediate quality medical care. Whether at our main Orlando, Florida office, traveling across the U.S. or visiting the States, we bring you the best medical care without waiting for an appointment. Become a member today by calling 407-234-5282 or visit us online at jbhmeg1.com. JBH Boutique Care is proud to sponsor Sounds of the Diaspora, music and conversations with artists, and host Dion Parson every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Source TV Radio Network, WTSN, Washington, D.C.